Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another film review. And today's film review is none other than the film Hook. So, what is the film Hook about? Well, essentially, it's a film about family, it's a film about love, and it's a film, most importantly, about trying to take responsibility for what is most important in your life. And for Peter Pan, what's most important in his life is his family, his friends, and most importantly, his kind of overwhelming ability to protect the ones he loves. And in this film, it's really tested to the limit. So, let's get into the story. Essentially, we start off with Peter Pan being a lawyer, and he is at his little girl's school play of his story. Now, he doesn't know he's Peter Pan from the legend at this point. He just believes he's a father going to his children's events and trying to balance his work life with his home life. However, the conflict in his life begins to come in when he tries to go to his young boy's uh, baseball game. But sadly, due to conflicts with his work, he has to send one of his colleagues down to the game to record it. And this begins to cause a divide between his children and himself. Then his wife takes him back to England to go and visit Wendy. During the weekend off at Wendy's, his wife tries to push the boundary with him and remind him that this is the only time he gets with his children whilst they're young, so he should take it whilst he can, or he's going to regret it for the rest of his life. During a conversation with Wendy, who adopted Peter, he begins to realize that something isn't quite as it seems. Wendy tries to explain to him that he has lost a lot of his memories. This is why he can't remember his parents. This is why, most importantly, he can't remember what happened before he fell in love with the girl he is married to. It turns out that through a flashback, we learn that Peter Pan, who was madly in love with Wendy, went back to her house many times. But when she had grown too old, he found himself falling in love with her daughter. This goes on to become the woman he marries. However, due to this, it causes him to grow up, and Peter Pan is no longer Peter Pan. Instead, he's just Peter, a lawyer who has a family and kids. However, his past comes back to haunt him in this film when all of a sudden Captain Hook takes advantage of the situation and uses it as an attempt to steal his children from their beds and take them to Neverland. Wendy tries to remind him that he needs to go to Neverland to save his children. However, Peter, being skeptical and not believing all of this fairy tale and believing it all to be a book, finds himself in inner turmoil in which he begins to believe that everything that Wendy's saying is made up and that someone has just burgled his children. However, he begins to wake up to the idea when Tinkerbell finally comes through the window and decides to take him off to Neverland. He is then faced with the other conflict of being reunited with the Lost Boys after a failed attempt at trying to save his kids from Captain Hook. Tink makes a bargain with Captain Hook, saying that she can bring Peter Pan back to being Peter Pan within 3 days. When he goes back to the Lost Boys, Peter finds himself confused. He's surrounded by a bunch of kids who don't seem to have any concept of right or wrong, and most importantly, he begins to find himself in a situation where he feels like he's being surrounded by a group of school children and not being listened to. Their new leader begins to say that he will kill Peter if he can't prove that he's not a pirate. However, after some influence from Tinkerbell and some magic of believing, Peter finally wakes up and reminds himself of who he is. However, before this, it turns out that one of the Lost Boys who touches Peter's face begins to get an idea that Peter is the same Peter they knew, he's just grown up. Alongside this, they have to convince Peter to start eating, as due to the fact that his imagination has gone since he has grown up, he is struggling to see what is there to be seen. Once he finally gets his powers back, Peter has a second opportunity to save his children. However, his inner conflict hits him once again when it turns out that Captain Hook has been using his play at trying to be the boy's father against Peter. Hook has convinced Peter's son that he is a better father figure. This makes it really hard for Peter to take Hook's hook, and instead makes him have to come up with a separate plan altogether. Another conflict in this story turns out when Tinkerbell admits her feelings for Peter. She admits that she's been madly in love with him for years, but never had the ability to show him. She becomes human size and then back to her fairy size after the rejection that she receives from Peter. Putting their differences aside, Tink and Peter decide to go off and save the children once and for all from Captain Hook. Peter reveals to his children that he is Peter Pan, and they manage to overcome Captain Hook by trapping him once again inside the belly of a crocodile. So, Hook. What did I think of this film? Well, I watched this film a very, very, very long time ago. And I've always loved Robin Williams' performance in this film. I love the way that he's energetic, charismatic, and most importantly, the way that he balances his ability from being a serious adult and comedic kind of aspect to being a comedic childish like. I mean, I love the way that he kind of comes across in these films as someone who doesn't only understand children, but he understands imagination. And I feel like that's the strongest element in this film overall. And for that reason, I give Hook a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next film review. Until then, goodbye, stay beautiful, and have an incredible day.